Great. Okay. All right. Well, welcome, the House Transportation Committee. We're back today from the weekend. This is our first meeting of the day. It's Tuesday, February 28th, and we're going to continue with the committee to walk through the draft of it's 23-0157, otherwise known as our draft of the T-bill. And today we're looking at draft 2.2 with our legislative counsel, Anthea Dexter Cooper. And as a committee, right, remember, we have kind of gone through the bill we left with one section left. That was the section dealing with electric vehicle incentives. So Anthea, I'll let you kind of root us in the pages and the documents that we read, but just sort of the committee, you might want to pull out a printed copy, a document that looks like this, which was a chart that we were looking at, as well as the proposal, the draft 2.2. So, great. So, welcome back, Anthea.
Thanks for having me. So for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly put up draft 2.2 so people who are there can orient themselves there. And then I will switch over to the chart.
Okay, great. I see a question from Representative Campbell, who's joining us on Zoom.
Yes, thank you. I'm clicking on the links on the website. Whoops, what happened? Can you still hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
Now this is full screen. So
you can see you.
There we go. The second item, the side by side under Anthea's name, the link doesn't seem to work. So
okay. Well, I can tell you it works now, so maybe try refreshing, but okay. I think that this is probably not the document you're going to spend most of your time in today. I think the two documents you're going to want to be in are the first one, draft 2.2, and then the last one, the big picture comparison of current vehicle incentive programs and transportation bill proposal. Draft 1.5, that was like the earlier version of the side-by-side. It had all of the text, and I put it up because I think it is useful for some purposes and I wanted it to be accessible for people, but it is also based on draft 1.5. It has not been updated to draft 2.2. So if it doesn't load, I think it's probably not the worst thing. And hopefully Jeannie can get it fixed if it continues to not work on your end. And if not, I can always send it to you again by email. Just let me know.
But if it's loading for you, Anthea, it should be.
Thank you.
It should be. Okay, great.
Okay, so if you're in draft 2.2, where we skipped over was starting on page 9 with the repeal of existing vehicle incentive programs and then running all the way through to where you have the additional money for electrify your fleet at section 14 on page 25. So that's the gap of the bill that we did not talk about last week. In terms of where I think it may be easier to kind of like track what's happening, that's going to be the chart. It's the last document posted under my name, big picture comparison of current vehicle incentive programs and transportation bill proposal. The way this chart is laid out is it's sort of grouped by categories, and it provides sort of summary points of differences for the current law and the proposed new law in draft 2.2, but it doesn't actually include any of the text of the bill itself, except in like a couple very small instances. So if you're going to want to look at the actual language, you need to look at the bill. If you're going to want to see kind of big picture point of comparisons, kind of like your decision points, then that's going to be the chart. And as we work through all of this, if you identify something when you're in the chart and you're like, I think this needs to change, I can certainly change it in the text of the bill afterwards. So I think if it works for the committee, stick with the chart unless we need to see the language, and then we'll jump between the two.
Does that make sense to everybody? We're like kind of working between the two documents, but focusing on the chart. All right.
And then I have my one note on the chart from last Thursday when you started to talk about this, but then we're like, I don't know if we have the time to do it, and then switch to do the mileage-based user fee before you had to be on the floor. My one comment is committee seems okay with codifying. And that's because the part of the chart that you talked about last week was the first row under general provisions where it's got type of law and it's got all of the, which should now work, hyperlinks, all of the citations for the session law for the creation of the first program in 2019 and then all of the subsequent amendments. And the approach that is being proposed by the administration in this draft of the T-bill is to codify it all at 19 VSA Chapter 29. So I think the committee has reached general agreement on codifying, and now it's the decisions that all relate to what actually do you codify. So that's where we left off.
That is where we left off.
Okay. We had just dipped our toe into talking about definitions, and the definitions that are proposed for inclusion by the administration for this draft are for electric bicycle, electric cargo bicycle, and plug-in electric vehicle, which is going to include your battery electric vehicle and your plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. The reason why these three terms would need to be defined in this language, I'm mentioning this again because it sort of matters, is that this is proposed for codification in Title 19. The rest of the places where you're dealing with the definitions for electric bicycle, there isn't a definition in statute for electric cargo bicycle, and for the plug-in electric vehicles, those are already in 23 BSA Section 4. That's the main definition section for Title 23. Those definitions will not apply in Title 19 unless you do what is proposed, where you say it's defined as, and it has the same meaning in these other places. That is good, because if the definition is changed in Title 23, the definition will track into Title 19. So let's just use as an example, if at some point in the future, the definition for plug-in electric vehicle is modified to address a emerging type of technology that you don't know yet, that would track over. Although, like, the names of your incentive programs might need to change, but it would track there. Or if you changed the definition of electric bicycle because there's a new class of electric bicycle, the class 4 electric bicycle, just making that up, then it would track in that definition as well. I'll pause there. That's the last of the sort of general provisions topics to cover with the vehicle incentive programs.
Any questions for Anthea about the definitions? Representative Pouch?
Thank you. How are they tracked between the two?
So you'll see in the language, it says electric bicycle has the same meaning as in 23 VSA section, et cetera, et cetera. So if you were to change that, then it would still have the same definition as the one in this other place. The only one that is not that definition where it says has the same meaning as this other part of statute is the definition of electric cargo bicycle. And that's because there's not currently a definition in statute for electric cargo bicycle. However, part of the administration's proposal here is to incentivize it through the Replace Your Ride program and the Electrify Your Fleet program. And I think it is very important that you define what an electric cargo bicycle is, because some of the electric cargo bicycles, and this relates to a bill that the committee worked on 2 years ago, they have more than 750 watts of power, which means that they do not fall under the federal definition of electric bicycle. And where I think it's significant in terms of what could be incentivized is an electric cargo bicycle is not just a bicycle that has an electric motor between 750 and 1,000 watts, because there are a lot of electric mountain bikes that do have the greater wattage, but don't have the same like carrying capacity and intended usage as the cargo bikes that, you know, are meant to carry groceries or carry additional passengers on them.
That's very good to know. These are other questions? Looks like we're good.
Okay. So now we are getting into the first of the programs that's proposed to be codified, the incentive program for new PEVs. This is one of the oldest programs. This is one of the programs that was created in 2019. And it's the program that's been running the longest because it started before Mileage Smart was up and running. The state got the incentive program for new PVs up and running first. It's actually had a name change since then. It used to be the new incentive program for PVs, the new confused people, but it's the program that is incentivizing new vehicles, only plug-in electric vehicles. This is the one that is just based on income eligibility. You do not have to make a swap in replacing a less efficient vehicle. It does not have the same Mileage Smart focus as being on used vehicles. This is, I think, when people think of the state's electric vehicle incentive program, this is the main one they're thinking of. In terms of existing law, the consulting entities are the Departments of Environmental Conservation and of Public Service, Vermont Electric Distribution Utilities. That is a big part of the legacy aspect of the program because the incentives used to be distributed through the electric distribution utilities like the Green Mountain Power or BED and the state's network of community action agencies. In the version of the program that is being proposed by the administration, they would not be required to consult with any entities. They could choose to, but they're not required to. So I think that's sort of your first decision point is, do you go with the administration's proposal to say that they don't need to consult with anyone specifically? And I'm not saying you need to make that decision point now. I'm just highlighting as we go through as this will be a decision point.
Sure.
So that's the language we see on page 10 down around line 12. That's procurement requirements.
That's going to be the next one for contractors. And that's going to be the same in both subdivision 2, subject to state procurement requirements, where you're going to see the comparison of where the language is and isn't. In draft 1.5, in the side-by-side for draft 1.5, if you look at the left-hand column, you'll see that it used to say, or it currently says, because it's the existing session law, the Agency of Transportation Agency in consultation with. And then in the proposal, subdivision 1 just says created, administered by Agency of Transportation without the extra language about who shall be consulted with.
I just need to catch up with you. I need to find, because that's the 1.5 chart.
If you have that bigger chart, it's going to be like a 25-page chart.
Yeah, I have it here, but I want to make sure that I'm with you. It's bigger, it's fat one, right? But that looks long, right?
Yes, and it's on legal paper.
Yeah.
So if you're on page 2 of that,
Thank you.
you'll see to the left, subdivision A1, that's where it was previously under session law, creating the program saying who shall be consulted with.
All right, folks, I'm with, is everybody with us? Because we are,
Yeah, so can I just ask you?
please, yeah.
So you're saying that they're, I'm just reading your comment on the far right of that side-by-side comparison of the two versions. Your comment about the session law is probably completely obsolete now.
Yep.
So are you advising that this change?
So that is related to subdivision A2. And you'll see that in the bottom right corner, it's talking.
Appropriation.
Yeah, so it says the agency is authorized to spend this money as appropriated in the fiscal year 2020 budget. So I am saying that because the prior appropriations and authorizations have been completely depleted that was in this original enacting legislation, it's probably obsolete. One of the things that you talked about last week is in what is proposed for codification, there are dollar symbols related to things like what the income eligibility caps are or what the incentive amounts are, but there is nothing in what's proposed to be codified that either appropriates money or sets a minimum appropriation per year, the way that you see like in town highway aid, it says like there needs to be an appropriation of this large amount to provide town highway aid. Nothing in what is proposed for codification is requiring money to be put towards these programs in the future While that is probably not something you need to address this year, because the programs are, according to the agency, fully funded for the next fiscal year because of the large appropriations that were made last year, that is going to be an ongoing conversation that will probably need to be had for the entirety of the time that the language was codified. But yes, that piece, obsolete, money has been used up, and I saw Chris nod from the corner of my eye, so I think he is in agreement that the 2020 appropriations have all been used.
All right, okay.
Okay, so Representative Shaw, this is what you started to talk about on page 10. Subdivision 2, starting on line 12. Subject to state procurement requirements, the agency may retain a contractor or contractors to assist with marketing, program development, and administration of the program. That is pretty much analogous to language that has been included in session law in the past. Agency is not proposing a deviation in the approach there. Still saying they can contract. It needs to be subject to the state procurement policies and rules, and what they are contracting for will be marketing, program development, and administration of the program. And that is what is currently being done by CSE and Drive Electric Vermont. And that was a separate appropriation and authorization in the last big bill and T-bill.
That answered your question, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm now on the top of page 2 of the chart, the shorter chart, the 5-page chart. One of the things that the administration is proposing with the codification of the incentive program for new PEVs is that instead of there just being language like there is in session law that currently says that there will be an emphasis on creating and matching incentives for BEVs, that instead the program should be incentivizing the purchase and lease of battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles with an electric range of 20 miles or greater per complete charge, and telling them to establish a minimum electric range in order for a PHEV to be eligible for an incentive as technology progresses. So this is some of the flexibility that the agency is looking for in terms of phasing out what vehicles can be incentivized. So under the current program, if you were to go and buy a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that has its base manufacturer suggested retail price being under the dollar amount, it could get like 4 miles to the charge, which means it's almost exclusively going to be running on gasoline, and it would still be incentivizable under the program as it exists now. I don't think the agency is saying in 2023, we're going to phase out incentives for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, but the language that they're proposing for codification creates, one, this expectation that there will be a change in the incentivization structure and drawing a line at 20 miles to a charge. And once technology has progressed to that point, the incentives are supposed to reflect that and the desired uptake of more fully electric vehicles. So I would say that that is one of the bigger differences from a policy perspective between what is currently session law and what is proposed for codification. It could at some point shift the menu of vehicles.
It could shift the
Menu of vehicles that are available. So if you go to Drive Electric's website, for example, and you like click on the little check boxes to filter by different things, there would end up being at some point in the future probably a button that says like plug-in hybrid electric vehicle minimum electric range 20 miles per hour, because that's what you're going to need to check to be able to see if it's eligible for a state incentive when technology gets there.
Yeah, I was on the site not that long ago, just checking. It's interesting where how things have already changed right now from when like some of the vehicles that had like 20 miles of battery charge range. I mean, that's what this
It's getting.
they're getting. Yeah. I'm not seeing questions. I have a feeling that we might need to
Process.
process, yeah, because it's like we're like for those who are new to the committee, knowing what was and how we're changing it, I'm sure we're processing it a little bit.
Does it,
Go ahead.
thank you, Madam Chair. So this is, is the agency reacting to wanting to update the language as it currently stands because the technology hasn't quite caught up and the market hasn't quite caught up? The supply of vehicles is not, we don't have enough battery-only vehicles available, or were plugins already included in battery?
So the overarching term is going to be plug-in electric vehicle, and then that is the umbrella term for either battery electric vehicles.
Right.
Only way you're going to make that thing go is if you plug it into the wall to charge, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And those are going to be the ones that I have a slide that I use for like sort of more generic presentations that shows different vehicles. That's going to be like the Prius Prime, where you can put in gasoline on one side and electric charge on the other. The Volt, not the Bolt. That's actually part of my slide, and the way I can remember it is battery electric vehicle, Bolt EV.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, so in
So-
other words, what I'm asking is, so because BEVs doesn't include plug-in hybrid gas, partial gas, they want to add that into the incentive program.
No, so under the current incentive program, both of them are incentivized, and it might actually help if I switch to the charts at the end, which I did not fix. I fixed the first 5 pages. I'm gonna need to go back to get the other piece of the chart. One sec. I will get Jeannie to post the full version. If you go back to what I posted last Thursday, you'll have it. Here we go. If you go to the end of what you all have printed out, this is the current structure for incentives. So under the incentive program for new PEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are incentivized, but what the administration is doing in response to the existing session law is they were just incentivized at a lower rate. One of the changes that they're proposing for this version is not to have the incentive amount be lower. So you'll see in the proposed version how there's not that double column. There's just one column for the incentive being up to $6,000. Instead of having the approach be we're incentivizing all plug-in hybrid electric vehicles just at a lower incentive amount, they're asking for the flexibility to potentially incentivize plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, a smaller subset of them, the ones that are more efficient and get more range for the charge, but potentially having that larger up to $6,000 incentive amount, or $3,000 depending on how you're qualifying.
Go ahead, Representative Pouch.
Thank you. What is the process when they decide to establish a different range? So this is in codified law, it says 20, but it gives them the power to change that. So how does that look if 2 years from now they want to do that?
Yeah, so the way that the program currently gets like the color of the details that fit within the session law parameters is through the program guidelines. And if you go to Drive Electric's website on all the different incentive programs, you'll see the program guidelines. It would be questions for the agency as to how would they envision and what would they be doing in terms of like regularly updating those program guidelines to change the different incentive amounts or the different vehicles that are being incentivized. But they would have the ability to do that without going to the General Assembly for the authority to do that, provided that it's within the statutory allowances of what's been codified. When we get to the language on reporting, that's one of the things that you're asking them to tell you in the annual reports. An alternative option, and I'm not saying it's better, I'm just saying it's a different option, it is not what the agency is proposing, is you could require it to go through rulemaking. We talked about that way in the beginning of session.
Yeah.
I think, not speaking for the agency, the rulemaking process does not allow for quick responses to like changes in market dynamics. I don't think they're looking to change the incentives on like a weekly basis, but probably something more than the 8+ months that would be required to do it through the rulemaking process.
That answer your question?
Yes, yeah.
And I know we do, well, if, I know we're walking through this now, if we do have questions for someone from AOT, I know that we Costa is here with us. It's hard for me to see everybody's hands go up, but I see that Scott, Representative Campbell has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just observe that the cutoff threshold for number of miles that you get on electric can be very touchy. It can rule in or out, certain makes and models. So I guess I'm just wondering whether it's a good idea to leave that completely up to discretion of AOT. I recognize the delay issue with rulemaking or with coming back to the legislature, although vehicle models don't change that awfully fast. But for example, the Ford Fusion, which I had at one time, plug-in hybrid, had a stipulated range of 21 miles. So if the agency decided to make it 25 threshold, then it would rule out that Ford Fusion. I guess I'm just pointing that out, that threshold can rule in or out certain models, and it's not as wide open as it first seems.
So the one thing I will just raise there, looking at the language, is under program structure on page 10 at the bottom. It says the incentive program for new PEVs shall structure PEV purchase and lease incentive payments by income to help all Vermonters benefit from electric driving, including Vermont's most vulnerable. Specifically, the incentive program for new PEVs shall apply to both purchases and leases of new PEVs with an emphasis on, but not saying you can't incentivize, but an emphasis on incentivizing the purchase and lease of battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, PHEVs, with an electric range of 20 miles or greater per complete charge. And then where you get the phasing out as technology allows is going to be on page 13, when it's talking about how the incentives shall apply to manufactured PHEVs with a base MSRP as determined by the Agency of Transportation, based on phasing out incentives for PHEVs with an electric range of less than 20 miles and benchmarked to a base MSRP of the equivalent of approximately $50,000 or less in model year 2023. So there is nothing there that says those vehicles can't be incentivized. There's nothing that's setting a timeline. It is, as Representative Campbell points out, giving them a lot of discretion there. I do not think it would give discretion to phase out incentives absent a change in statute for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that got that 25 miles per complete charge. So I don't think they have the authority to phase out incentives, but they have the authority to set the incentive amounts and the not to exceed $6,000 and $3,000 brackets. So they have a lot of flexibility, but I don't think they could phase it out completely and say we are no longer incentivizing a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that gets 25 miles to the charge without the General Assembly changing what is codified, if you go with their proposal. And I was thinking that through as I was talking.
Yeah.
And I will let you know if I change my take when I think about it some more, not in real time.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Representative Bartholomew, you would
Well, I'm just formulating thoughts. I mean, it makes sense to give some latitude to change over time because technology does change. The problem is that not all cars are created equal. And just because your car says it'll get 30, my car said it would get 30, and you look at the little thing, it says you got 31 miles in electric. I've never gotten 31 miles, maybe in a nice 70-degree day in Kansas, but not winter day in Vermont. But even so, now that the car's got 70,000 miles on it, it never goes to 31 anymore. It goes to 21. So, it's kind of even within an individual car, there's variation, and between manufacturers is even more variation.
So one of the things that is included not in the proposed language for codification for this program, but for Mileage Smart, which is addressing used vehicles, and it talks about the minimum miles per gallon or miles per gallon equivalency, it would be looking at it when it was manufactured. These are new vehicles, so there is the ability to point to what is the manufacturer saying there, and it's not based on what the vehicle is getting in terms of range 3 years down the road, so with that deterioration. But what might make sense is to specify 20 miles or greater per complete charge based on, and then track that same language for whatever is reported to, I think it's the EPA there. So I think the point about according to who at the outset for that electric range is significant. And I think the deterioration over time is not as significant with this program as with other programs, because these are all new vehicles to begin with. And I will make a note to possibly add that in.
And Volkswagen taught us that you can't always rely on exactly what a car manufacturer tells you.
That makes some sense to me anyway, and be about basing it on the EPA rating on what we would call a window sticker rating when you buy the car. I think it gives it kind of a level, yeah, thanks, thank you, that everybody can look to. So, John, if you were getting 31, have to drive more carefully to get to 31.
Nice day.
On a nice day in Kansas. It gives them a benchmark to really look at, and it takes some of the subjectivity out of it, I think.
I mean, the alternative would be, at the inspection, you read off what the fuel efficiency was of the vehicle over the last year. That just seems like a, really draconian way to go about this.
So, this is,
So is the thinking that even incremental progress is better than no progress? Is that sort of how we're sort of thinking about this with the Mileage Smart, which is only about the used vehicles, right?
I would say this is the agency's proposal, so I wouldn't say it's our thinking, but I think we're responding to their proposal, but I
Right.
do think that what they're responding to is like, as more fuel efficient vehicles, like more not fuel, but like as the technology with electric vehicles improves, we want to be incentivizing that, people to get
Right.
more out of a battery. I mean, I think our battery charge and, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of complexity to this. I'm still like in real time wrapping my head around
Sure.
what
Yeah.
how the current program, I think what we have to focus on is this body and this committee did hash through the original program for electric vehicles. And now this is about where we need to make some adjustments as it's being codified into law. Because if you were to see, like, if you, some of the notes, it's all sprinkled in session law too. So we're trying to, we're both codifying it and trying to see what the changes are. So I think we might have to, I just know for myself, I think we need to muddle through it a little bit more and then we might have to come back and ask some more questions, because there are a lot of details here. And remember, we did receive pretty extensive testimony from the administration and Patrick Murphy on, that illustrated these proposals. So I know that, so that we could, people are looking to see what those are, that might be helpful too as we're walking through this. But I think we have a few documents in front of us right now, so maybe we should focus here. But just to remind the committee that we did get kind of this narrative from the agency about why they want to do it, and then this will be for us to decide. or if we want to have some of our changes put in here. So I would just say we kind of march on, and then we'll be able to kind of come back if there's some questions. How does that sound to people? Okay.
Marching on, so incentive amount and income eligibility. This, for the incentive program for new PEDs, there are no proposed changes to the approach, which is incentive amounts based on income, based on base MSRP, being certain vehicles being eligible. So it is a simpler test for whether or not you and the vehicle qualify, but it is pretty complicated in terms of the different moving parts. So if you go to the end of your packet, the third to last page is current law. The second to last page, where you start to see some highlighting, that's the proposal. I'm going to go to the last page, which is going to be the, if it's printed out, it's probably a legal page. So you're going to have to, these charts, unfortunately, because I changed the hyperlinks, you're going to need to go to last Thursday.
Yeah, on the last.
The long one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the big changes are adding a new income eligibility bracket. So currently you would have, for purposes of who is an individual for tax filing purposes, it's going to be single or head of household.
Ours are just cut off
Yeah.
Cut off.
Yeah, a few of us,
on this, yeah,
Oh,
We have,
I'm just
we have them in the long one.
some of us. do,
yeah.
Yeah,
hold on.
yeah.
okay. It needs to be a full page to get the whole thing.
I know, that's why I'm giggling, sorry. Here we go.
And I would say look at the earlier versions of them that you might have, but those are going to not reflect the most recent round of changes, because this was something the agency proposed a second tweak to.
Okay, I think I get the teeny one.
Okay, so would be separating out head of household and then giving it different ranges. For these incentives, there is, if you qualify with lower income, adjusted gross income, you get a larger incentive. If you qualify with higher adjusted gross income, you get a lower incentive. So that's why there are multiple rows for each of the types of bracket ranges. So first change is adding in individual head of household separated out. Second change is changing those ranges. So currently, an individual single tax filing status would not get a incentive if you made more than $100,000 for your adjusted gross income. No proposed change there, but to qualify for the higher incentive with lower income, they're proposing to shift that from a $50,000 cutoff to a $60,000 cutoff. So more individuals filing tax status single would qualify for the larger of the two incentives. You wouldn't have more people qualifying, but more people would get the higher incentive amount. For individual head of household, they're proposing to have it be the same as individual surviving spouse under current law. And then for individual surviving spouse under the modified law, they're proposing to increase those bands slightly. So it wouldn't be a cutoff of $125,000. It would be a cutoff of $150,000 adjusted gross income. That would also be the same for married filing jointly. And to get the larger incentive with lower income, instead of the cutoff being $75,000, it would increase to $90,000. So for this bracket, more people would qualify for an incentive because it's going up to $150,000 from $125,000. And within that, more people would be eligible for the higher incentive because the first threshold would be lifted to $90,000 from $75,000. Married filing separately tracks individual filing single, so those are increasing the floors for the lower incentive amount to $60,000, or sorry, the ceiling for the larger incentive to $60,000. It's the floor for the other one. And then married filing jointly would track individual surviving spouse. So that's how you qualify for the incentive. The agency is also proposing that the incentive amounts would be larger. It would be up to $6,000 for the lower income qualification, up to $3,000 for the higher income qualification, and that there's not one specific amount specified for plug-in hybrids. It would be either vehicle, and because it says up to, the agency has a lot of flexibility there. That's why you see in the modified, the proposed version with the highlighting, why there's not those two columns. Representative Dodge, that was your earlier question, and why there are the less than or equal to symbols as opposed to just a straight dollar amount. I know there's a lot there. And one thing I would maybe say is thinking about less, what is it currently and how is it changing, but think about like what it would end up being, because these are numbers that have been like adjusted and changed several times since the programs were created. There hasn't been this proposal for the approach of only having like one incentive amount and that same up to piece, but the income bands have been modified, I think at least once, if not twice, since 2019.
And is it fair to say, Anthea, that the problem that we're trying to solve is that we're trying to get in where the more people adopting PEVs and EVs?
So I think that is
what's behind this, like broadening the bands of income eligibility and putting in raising the incentives in certain I mean, essentially for folks who of lower income, having the incentive be greater.
Yeah.
Right.
I think in general, what the agency is looking for with their proposals is to get more people who the agency and the General Assembly are determining are the people that should be getting a vehicle incentivized to be able to get an incentive. One of the things that makes Vermont's program unique is, unlike some other states, and if you think back when you got the presentation from CSE and they were talking about some of the differences, Vermont is the only one that has this income eligibility piece to it. So there are people that are out and about in the world in Vermont who don't fall into these bands and couldn't get an incentive under the program. And it's not the same situation that you have in some states where dealers know anyone who's walking in the door has an incentive. Maybe it's a larger incentive based on income because some of the states do give a bump. But I think the agency, and again, I can't speak for them, is looking for flexibility and to find the sweet spot where it's the right incentives for the right people. And that's something that you guys clearly need to be involved in.
Yeah, great. I saw Representative Campbell had his hand up, then Representative Shaw and Representative Burke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm wondering whether it's a good idea to be introducing these income cliffs in this proposal as proposed. So if you're $60,001 of income, if I'm reading that correctly, all of a sudden your possible incentive for buying a car drops by $3,000. I guess that seems pretty harsh to me. So I'll just say that I don't know whether it makes whether it's practical to try to do something about that, but that's just, I wanted to make that observation.
Would you mind restating that, Representative Campbell? I don't think I was completely following your statement, and I want to make sure I'm hearing you.
Okay, yeah. I'm just observing that we're introducing income cliffs here for eligibility for the various incentives. So for example, if you earned $60,000, you can get up to $6,000 on a incentive on a car. But if somehow you earn $60,001, your possible incentive drops in half. So it just seems rather harsh. I was kind of toying, excuse me, in my mind with having a sort of a $30,000 band of proportional incentive between the 6,000 and the 3,000, but I don't know whether that's too complicated.
So I would just say in response to that, one, there are existing cliffs and there has been since the program was created. There have always been drop-off points. And then I would urge you to talk to the agency in terms of if there would be difficulties in administering the program if you gave them like discretion to do more of like a sliding scale approach. And then one of the things that is at play here is with the sort of the auditing based on your tax records to figure out that information after the fact. If you draw on multiple bands, I think it would create more administrative difficulties. Maybe it wouldn't, but that's something to hear from the agency on.
To Representative Campbell's point, that's not unlike any other program we have in the state of Vermont. There's income cutoff points for many of the programs that we do run, and it does sound kind of harsh when you're talking about meals for elders or whatever, but there's always been in my memory, some sort of a cutoff so that people don't take advantage of where we are. And is this the right number? Who knows, but it is a cutoff. My second point is I have a little, I'm trying to figure out on page 11, line 3, 4, what that says as it relates to the charts we just looked at. How do we wind that together? 3,000. You give not more than 3,000 one incentive per individual. So would that be I don't get that. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at $5,000 incentives in another building.
So if you are looking at the current program, the language would split where it would say an incentive of X for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and Y for a battery electric vehicle. It's been collapsed here. So the language on page 11, lines 3 and 4, provide not more than one incentive of not more than $3,000 for a PEV. You were giving the agency like full latitude within that to decide like a plug-in hybrid can be incentivized at this lower amount. It's providing fewer required details.
So that how does that fold into like under an individual single? There's a thank you. And a new incentive program for new PEVs. There's plus or minus. There could be a $6,000 incentive for that.
Yeah. So where you're going to get that is the $3,000 that you found on page 11, line 4. That is the second row in each of the bands. So here, I'll stand up. See.
Okay.
So that's this 3,000, this 3,000, this 3,000, this 3,000, and this 3,000. If you go to page 12, line 4, you'll see it says $6,000. That's where you get the top rows.
Okay.
So all of the language is repeated again for the different income bands.
Just couldn't make that.
Yeah.
Now it adds up.
Yes. Sometimes it is much easier to visualize it in the chart, but then you have to actually like draft it in language.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative, I think Representative Burke and then Representative Pouch.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm glad to see the higher amounts for the incentive, because I know there are people that say, you know, I don't qualify for Mileage Smart, but I really can't afford to buy a new vehicle. And I think this is gonna help us to make a secondary market too, eventually.
Representative Pouch?
Okay. And well, I think we're going to get to it. And I think I asked this question to the administration. The less than number that going into the future, they could reduce these amounts through that same process we talked about.
I think they would do it through the program guidelines, and it would be a question for them, like, how often are they gonna do it?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think if you think about the position that they're going to be in for administering a program. Like, they want to make it easy for people. Like, they don't want it to be this sort of unknown. You show up at the dealership and you have no idea, like, has the incentive amount changed between the time you like started looking for a car and now? I think the flexibility they're looking for is not to make lots of changes. It's to make occasional changes without having to come back to the General Assembly. It's certainly a decision for you all to make as to whether or not you're comfortable with giving them that flexibility and authority.
So I'm sort of thinking that maybe they would change because the money allocated is going down or not there, and do they start to squeeze the program? You know, I don't know.
I can assure you I can't answer that question.
Yeah, the reason to have that flexibility, I guess I'm wondering about that.
Well, that, I don't think Anthea can answer that for us. I don't know. We do, it's hard, I can't, actually, maybe if I look at here, it's hard when we see a document.
Do you want me to stop
Yeah,
so you can see Costa?
Sure, Costa, I don't know if you're able to comment on I'm happy to ask him to ask it again, but I don't know if you heard his question and if you care to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Costa Pappas with the Agency of Transportation. I did hear part of the question. Is this in reference to the brackets or the thresholds?
Yes, it is. Representative Pouch, why don't you restate your question? Because we couldn't see your face while we were looking at the document, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have some flexibility in the proposal for the agency. For example, one of them is the incentive amounts is a less than or equal. So I guess we're assuming it's the equal to 6,000 or 3,000, but potentially the agency could change those and reduce them. And what would be the reason for reducing them? Would it be based on the funds available, or I can't come up with another reason.
Okay, thank you for your question, Representative. It could be different factors. I mean, fundamentally, I think Anthea summarized it well. What we're looking for is flexibility to make sure that the incentives get in the hands of the folks that need them. That's our purpose for what we're recommending. And remember that the state incentives also dovetail with the federal incentives. That's the other part of the equation here that are similarly income-based. They don't line up with the brackets that you're seeing for our proposal, but the idea is that, the lower the income, the more help one needs to purchase an electric vehicle. That's kind of the rationale for why they're scaled that way. And the tax credits at the federal level have also undergone a lot of changes. It used to be that you needed taxable income to be able to benefit from that. That's no longer the case. That is now available to anyone within certain income limits. So that's kind of the reasoning behind how they're structured that way. What would lower that? I'm not exactly sure, but again, the focus here is on making sure that for certain income groups, these state incentives working in concert with the federal incentives makes the vehicle purchasing decision simpler for folks. That's kind of our overarching goal here.
And so, and it's hard to know if I'm hearing you correctly, Costa, hard to imagine the scenario where you would lower the amount of those incentives, or because it's the way it's written is up to, it's up to $6,000, but what the agency is requesting is flexibility there.
That's right, Madam Chair. We don't know what the demand is going to be at any given point in time. And again, the introduction of the federal incentive does make it more conducive to purchase these vehicles. So there could be, different factors, but the idea is if we have this flexibility, we are able to optimize and maximize these incentives that will work with the federal incentive to get to our goal.
Representative Shaw?
So Costa, thanks. If wildly we had huge demand for these programs, and the money, the millions we've set aside currently run out within the next budget year, so that there's no incentive available, I'm assuming, and that always gets me in trouble, but I'm assuming that the administration would be back in either during budget adjustment or during the next budget year asking to put more money into these programs. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Well, Representative, I can't speak to next year's governor's recommended budget. It's a little early to be formulating the budget for next year.
I guess maybe I should have said, would that be the process?
Well, again, because it's tied to the budget, I can't forecast what that, the governor's recommended will include next year.
Fair enough.
Okay. Anthea,
I
yeah.
just want to highlight one more thing. When you're looking at those up to, not more than amounts, remember that in this version of the agency's proposal, they have combined both plug-in hybrid electric vehicle cap and battery electric vehicle cap. And under the current iteration of the program, the approach has been to have a smaller incentive for the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. You would need to have that language, the up to, and the flexibility there, I think, to also allow for the phasing out as technology advances piece. And I think if you envision a point in the future, you might end up having a lower incentive for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle or a tiered incentive for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle or something like that. And that's part of the reason why I think the up to is important if you are not going to be specifying this for plug-in hybrid electric, this for battery electric.
Great. Okay, so Representative Bartholomew, you had your hand up.
Are these, the flexibility built in this draft, is that in response to concerns we raised about a section that was in an earlier draft about authorizing the agency to make reasonable changes that are inconsistent with statute? Is that section now gone?
So if you go to draft 2.2, you will see.
Is that, which is this one?
Yep, the one that's posted. You will see on page 24 where it says on line 12.
Wait, I can't find it. Got too many open. 24.
24.
Deleted.
Deleted. That is the language where it says deleted right there.
Yeah.
That is where all of the language was that you didn't like about the JTOC process where they could make changes.
So what they've done is they've built the flexibility into the other part, which is more appropriate, right?
I
mean, in my mind.
it may be in your mind. I would
but
say
that's how they've addressed. That's why this flexibility is put in here.
yeah. So I would say if you are looking at draft 2.2, almost all of the highlighting is additional areas of flexibility added, JTOC appropriate, JTOC changing, getting permission to notwithstand law removed. So I think they heard your concerns when you said you didn't like that part.
I think it's a cleaner approach. And people probably remember that earlier discussion.
Yeah, yeah, I think there was.
So that's gone.
That is gone.
All right.
They do not get to sort of ask permission when you're not in session, just to JTALK to say, hey, I know that the law says that the incentive amount is this, but we want to do something different. Please give us approval or refrain from disapproving. That entire concept and approach has been removed from the bill.
Okay. There were some other questions. I think Representative Burke, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, does everybody in here know about how to check the incentives to see what you might qualify for? It's just an interesting exercise.
Drive electric.
Yeah. Sort of check out different car makes and you can even put in different income levels to sort of see what certain people would get.
Yeah. I hope that members of the committee have or will do that if they haven't already. It's kind of fun. And Representative Pouch, did I see your hand?
No,
Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you. This might not be a question for Anthea, but somebody on here might be able to tell me. So I know that we've said that we're kind of on track for getting to that like 15% adoption of new car purchases, our goal for 20. Can somebody remind me how many that would be in fiscal year 24? No.
Not me.
Okay.
I don't know if Costa knows.
Is it like 300 new cars or something like that?
Costa, are you? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't have those numbers either, but I'm sending off an email.
You're muted, Costa.
All of a sudden, we lost your sound. You don't look like you're muted, but on your device. But
Okay,
try
can you
again?
hear me?
oh, suddenly you got really fuzzy.
Okay.
That's
There you go.
better. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have those numbers either, but I will get them and report them to the committee. So it's for year 24, if we're meeting the target, was that the question?
Yeah, around how many vehicles are we talking about incentivizing?
Okay, I'll get that and report back to the committee.
Thank you.
I guess what I'm trying to make sense of your question, I mean, it's my part, but we gotta meet 25,000, right? And we're at 8. So you're not talking about that gap. We sold 583 incentives last year. So what number are you trying to get to?
I'm just trying to figure out what it costs, how much, what we're actually getting.
How many I think she's asking how many, if we have 1 million in incentives out there, how many vehicles will be incentivized? Oh, okay. Okay, I got you.
Is that right? Is that
Yeah.
Representative Dodge? Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm looking at something else here.
Is there about, 10 million left in the fund or something like that?
Yeah, so
That's
we're
supposed to be
not on
nice.
pace to make up that extra 17,000 cars. I think what you're trying to get.
I'm just,
Incentivized, yes.
Incentivized.
That's not our question. I mean,
So let's just one at a time so we can hear each other. So
Yeah, I got you.
is that what you were asking, Representative Dodge?
yes, I think as you are all trying to clarify what I'm asking, there are more things that I might be asking, so.
So
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand when we make the incentive qualify for people with higher incomes, is that gonna help us or harm us in terms of getting us, getting more cars out there, but and what will it cost us? Like, will it reduce the overall number of incentives that we give out because, or will it increase the number of incentives I'm guessing it's that we will be increasing the number of incentives, right? But then how much money is that? How much is it gonna get distributed?
I think if your question is about, are we gonna have enough to go out? I think there's consensus that there's a lot of funding that we last year put a lot, I think it was 12 million or and we have enough funding in there. There's not an anxiety about that it's gonna run out this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think through the testimony that we've received is that I think it's about the pickup is slower than we want it to be. So I think there are a number of programs that aim to get at people at different income levels. Like here, we're incentivizing lower income folks for more.
Right.
So that they could actually make the federal and the state incentives match up and get the replace your ride, being able to get used vehicles, So I hear your concern. I mean, what you're asking is a legitimate question, but I think there is consensus that the money we want people, this program we want to pick up the pace, right? I think that's fair to say.
So last year's big bill, there's about 18, if I have my numbers right, about $18 million in spending for EV incentives total. And if I remember the discussion at the time, that would probably take us out 3 years worth of incentives. So that was one lump sum. It ended up coming from the general fund, but it originally was in ARPA funding. So they did some magic downstairs and did some stuff and the talk was that's about 3 years worth of projected incentives.
Great.
There's no individual, you can only spend X in FY '24, X in 20 and 25,
So
or X
we
in
can
26.
say how far out we
I believe that
want.
was a lump sum appropriation to the program.
And there was language that said it should be used up as quickly as possible, but it carried forward. So I kind of viewed it as the like two priorities of like expeditiously getting it out the door, but if it doesn't go out the door in this fiscal year, it's still reserved for this program.
We fenced it off. The legislature fenced it off to protect those funds. I think it's a term that you might hear, how we fence off money. Yeah, it's a good question. It's like, it's at the crux of the matter, so. All right, well, this is, I know I'm feeling like I'm clear on what some of the rationale again for some of these changes and what it will do, but we've only made so far.
But you're addressing things that like are coming up later. So I think you're going to get to a point where you don't have as many questions because you have like just a better understanding of all of the proposed changes and the whys and the removal of the JTAC process and things like that. So it might seem like you only made it to page 2, but I think you really made it. It's only a 5-page document.
Yeah, that's true. I'm thinking about this.
Sense.
Okay, so where are we?
You're going to be in the 3rd row of page 2.
Yep.
Okay, so this is where we're talking about, you were just talking about who would qualify and phasing outs of vehicles with range, but this is where you're getting the base MSRP. So under the current law, for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle with no range requirements, it's $40,000 or less base MSRP. So that's not going to be the sticker price. It's going to be like the price before the add-ons that are going into the sticker price. And then the sticker price is not necessarily the sales price, but it's what the manufacturer is suggesting the base iteration of the vehicle be sold for. If you go to Drive Electric's website, they'll have it all by the base MSRP. For battery electric vehicles, under current law, it's $45,000. And that was something that was upped. I think it was last year, or maybe it was the year before. And then if you get a special registration plate, so that's for an individual with a disability, either the hang tag with the wheelchair on it or the license plate with the wheelchair on it, then there is no base MSRP cap. So the vehicle could cost $40,000, $45,000, $60,000, and it would still be eligible for an incentive. It's not eligible for a larger incentive, and the incentives are not proportional to the price, but a vehicle that would not otherwise be incentivizable would be eligible for an incentive. Under the administration's proposal, and I'm going to work from the bottom up, go from the simplest to most complicated, for a special registration plate, no changes there. Still any base MSRP. For a battery electric vehicle, it would be benchmarked to a base MSRP in model year 2023 of not more than $50,000. So upping it by $5,000 and linking it to this model year. It could then grow with inflation over the longevity of the program. And then for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, it would also be $50,000 benchmarked to model year 2023. And this is where you're getting the and phased out for plug-in hybrid electrics with an electric range of less than 20 miles approach. So if you're looking at a comparison point between the base MSRP for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle now and under the proposal, it's increasing by a lot. It's going up by $10,000. That's the base MSRP, and that's going to continue to grow based on model year. But it's going to phase out with technology and range. And then for the battery electric vehicle, more straightforward, just that $5,000 increase with the benchmark.
So I think what will be helpful for us to do is to kind of injustice and actually say, does this make sense? How does the committee as a way of us working through the bill and the language of the bill? So this one seems like a good place to do that. Does everybody understand what's being proposed? And is this reasonable? But does this make sense? Do people agree with it, or would they like?
I don't have a problem with seeing an explanation. Maybe there is none.
Okay.
Base MSRP as determined by the agency. I mean, what does that mean?
So the base MSRP is not being determined by the agency, but it's the agency that's determining how it's like increasing for that benchmarking piece. So maybe they're gonna say like this, I think the RAV4 Prime is one of the ones that has been like right on the edge. So it was incentivizable 1 year and then it went up a little bit and now it's no longer incentivizable. Is that the approach that they're going to take with benchmarking? Are they just going to attach like an inflation rate and increase it that way and then round it to a nice whole number? You're giving them the discretion there for what their approach is. And I would ask them that question.
Representative McCoy.
What was the reason for being incentivized and then non-incentivized?
So-
Was it mileage or price?
So currently there's no change for the range that is in session law, but there is that base MSRP cap. So if the base MSRP for model year 20, I'm making stuff up.
Yeah.
The base MSRP for model year 2022 RAV4 Prime, let's pretend it was $39,999, just eked under. And then model year 2023,
Okay,
it's
so it's price.
$40,001.
So it's price. Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So Representative Couch.
Thank you. So you got 50,000 in MY 2023 and phased out. And again, this phase out with the range of 20 miles, that's up to the agency.
Yes.
And this just puts, we just get this expectation that it's going to happen. Or could happen. It doesn't have to happen.
You're telling them that it needs to be based on phasing out incentives. You're not requiring it, but they need to base their approach on it. So I think it's not as firm as shall, but it's more firm than may, somewhere fuzzily in between the two.
So, because it sounds like Representative Shaw, do you want more information from the agency on this?
Yeah, a little bit of that or need some punctuation somewhere.
Yeah.
To try to separate that
So
as determined from something.
I would say the way you read it is like first piece. I'm going to do BEVs because that one's easier. Manufactured BEVs with a base MSRP as determined by the Agency of Transportation. So they are determining what the base MSRP is, and they can change that from year to year as they see fit. But it needs to be benchmarked to a base MSRP of the equivalent of approximately $50,000 or less in model year 2023. So you are giving them unfettered ability to increase that base MSRP with the parameter that it needs to be benchmarked to $50,000 in model year 2023. If you want it to be like firmer than that, you certainly could put language there. I don't think adding a comma, which was what I was originally thinking, you can just put a comma here. I don't think that would help.
Yeah, I tried doing that, it didn't work yet.
Yeah, I was like, just put a, no, wait, don't put a comma there. That just is gonna make it more confusing. But, it is a lot of discretion because you're not even putting a ceiling there. You're not saying in the base MSRP shall not exceed, $70,000 or something like that. You're really saying it's at their discretion. And there's this one consideration that they need to do, benchmark it to $50,000 in model year 2023.
We're saying the base, when you buy a vehicle, it's got a window sticker on it, the base is X.
Yep.
But the purchase price may be Y.
Yep.
So they're going to go to the X part, and if you order too many accessories, that's on your ticket.
Yep. So the incentive amount doesn't change, provided that the vehicle hits that under base MSRP that the agency is determined, assuming that this is codified. Your vehicle could be way more expensive. It also, it could be that it has a more expensive sticker price. It also could be that it has a purchase price that's more than that sticker price. So there are like the three things that are at play. There's what's the base MSRP? Okay, that's what's looked at in terms of whether or not the vehicle is incentivizable. Then there's this is what the vehicle is being sold for sticker price. And then there's what you actually pay for it. And, in some years, the purchase price is going to be less than the sticker price. Other years, purchase price is going to be more than the sticker price. But one of the things that I have heard the agency say in looking at like other programs in other states is having it be by the base MSRP is easier to administer than having it be based on the purchase price. And it makes it so that Drive Electric can easily say, this vehicle is eligible, and this vehicle isn't eligible, because it's starting at that base MSRP.
So it doesn't matter what the vehicle, if our intent is to incentivize purchases for EVs, it doesn't matter what the final sticker price is, but it's the base price of the vehicle.
Exactly. This language, which is the same approach as session law, but you could do something different.
So the big change is that we're increasing the amount of the MSRP from current law.
Yeah, you're increasing it, and you're giving the agency the authority to increase it even more with those parameters. The benchmarking for BEVs and the benchmarking and phasing out for plug-in hybrids. And I think if you're looking for a more middle of the road approach, is you could put in not to exceed.
Yeah.
Base MSRP.
I'm hearing the committee having questions about that flexibility, and that just so that we might want to, I'm going to put a flag, if we can put a pin in this, that we might want to look at that. And I'm looking around the room that they're, that's right, yeah. Go ahead, Representative McQuaid.
Okay, so do we have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that only have an electric range of 20 miles?
There are some that are
20
very
miles, and
low.
then there's back to.
That's why they want to phase them out.
Internal combustion.
Well, that's a hybrid.
Hybrid.
Excuse me?
Hybrid.
It's a gallon of
So
gas.
so they're using their gas.
Yeah.
They can go 20 miles and then they go to gas.
Yeah.
They can go to 20 miles
Their gas mileage.
and then they can go to gas.
Yeah, but with a hybrid, you get much higher gas mileage. So it
Correct.
does continue to use battery technology as it's driving. They use batteries and use the gas.
But they're calculating the electric range of
Yeah.
only 20.
So,
And then when they go to
Folks,
hybrid,
one conversation at a time, Representative McQuaid speaking.
so when it's in its electric mode, it gets 20 miles or less. And then it kicks into its gas phase, but the gasoline that it uses, the mileage might be like 50 miles to the gallon instead of the 30 that my car.
so it's probably going to be more like a Prius and less like a Subaru Forester.
Okay.
But certainly not like a Leaf.
Right.
So if you go to Drive Electric's website and you click on electric range, you can see that there's a bucket for 0 to 19 miles.
Yeah.
These are the vehicles that are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that get an electric range of less than 20 miles. So the
They would
Subaru,
be
currently Vermont incentive eligible based on price. So you'll see that under the
Right.
Subaru Crosstrek, it says Vermont incentive eligible.
Yep.
The other ones are too expensive.
Okay,
But you can see that they're just under 20. If you had looked at this like 2 years ago, there would have been ones up there that got like 13.
Yeah.
So the technology is improving.
okay. And then we're going to actually phase, if this Subaru Crosstrek stays at 17 miles, it will be phased out of this program for incentive.
Yep, at the discretion of the agency
Okay.
in administering the program. I'm glad that there is an example of one that is
Yeah, me
like
too.
price eligible, but wouldn't be mileage eligible. It was a,
It makes it more concrete for all of us, yeah. So, okay. So we're putting a pin that we might not want to have quite as much flexibility there. So we'll be revisiting that one, right?
Well, for putting in the green books, yeah, serious about it.
You also can put a cap in there and know that it is something that if the agency thinks they're gonna butt up against, like, keep the language just as it is, but say, but in no circumstances or whatever to exceed $60,000 base MSRP. And if 4 years from now, they're like, look, this vehicle that used to cost $45,000 is now $60,000, please lift it. I mean, that's the same situation you've been in with the existing session law that just had a flat base MSRP cap, and that's what they did. They made a recommendation to increase this one by $5,000 and get rid of the one for individuals with disabilities. And that was because I believe it was the Chrysler Pacifica, which is a minivan that lots of people were getting because they could put a ramp in, and that got slightly more expensive. It was like $39,000, and then the next model year it was $41,000, and people couldn't get it anymore. Don't quote me on numbers or vehicles or anything like that, but that is my recollection of the example that was given for that one.
Okay.
This one's,
Go ahead.
if you're moving on, this next one's easy. So under current law, the incentives for plug-in electric vehicles are stackable. If you did replace your ride, you could also then do a incentive under the incentive program for new PEVs. You cannot use two incentives under the same program for one vehicle. So if you and your spouse were both individual filing single or married filing single, and you each qualified for an incentive, you wouldn't be able to use it for the same vehicle. You could use it for two different vehicles, but you couldn't use it for the same vehicle. And it's capped at one incentive per individual per year. There is not, like with the Replace Your Ride program, a lifetime cap where you're only eligible for one incentive under that program. No proposed changes there. So all those things would hold in the language that's proposed for codification.
If folks have questions on that, does that make sense? It seems more or less straightforward, I think, right? So could I say we're okay with that? Okay. Right.
Okay, administrative costs. This codified language would have the administrative costs be capped at up to 15%. That is language that was included last year in the big bill for that large, let's just say it was about $10 million appropriation, was up to 15% could be used for administrative costs. So I would say that this is maintaining the same approach. So you're codifying what the past practice has been. This again, and I'm going to say this many times, doesn't guarantee that money will be appropriated for the program to then be used for administrative costs. But if there is an appropriation for the program, then up to 15% can be used for administrative costs.
Sorry about slowing it down, but I'm a little, not concerned, but curious. Administering or promoting the incentive program for new PEVs. What's the company that runs the programs?
Center for Sustainable.
That's the one. Would they be promoting, or are they just administering?
So currently they are, I believe, just administering the program. But if you'll remember to the big bill last year, there was also that $2 million that went to the Agency of Transportation for its public-private partnership with Drive Electric Vermont.
Right. So, but that's a whole nother entity.
That's a whole nother thing. That is not the 15% here.
So they're promoting Drive Electric, but the center is not promoting, they're just administering.
Right, but in the next piece, you're requiring marketing and outreach, and you're saying that that can come from the 15%. So I think you have to think about what was done in the last big bill was to say $2 million for this Drive Electric piece, like period, new sentence, up to 15% for administrative costs that you knew was going to go to CSE because they had testified about it many times.
Right.
Language in the appropriations for the last go around for when large pots of money went to this was said that marketing and outreach was required and it could be considered part of administrative costs. That would be maintaining that. So it could be years down the road, you do not have that additional one-time appropriation for the public-private partnership for Drive Electric, still required to do outreach and marketing for the program. It's just coming from the 15% that can be used for administrative costs. And you can change that.
So,
Say you don't want to require marketing, you can say you're going to require marketing, but it's not part of the 15% that can go towards costs. I think there are many different approaches.
For me, it makes a big difference to the center, because if they're not promoting, they're only administering. Why are we paying them a percentage to promote when they don't promote?
Okay. The other thing I will just say there, and in the way you're considering it, is it says up to. It doesn't say they're guaranteed to get 15%. I certainly don't know if they are getting 15% of it now. It's to the agency and contracting for the services and what they include in it, needing to follow the state procurement policies. So again, I would say that a lot of those are questions for the agency, but I can point to things in the language like up to and I'll think of those parts.
are there questions on that one? I mean, let me, when we do, what would be another example in state government where we have something like this, a program like this? Just, because I just agree, like I can imagine there being an argument over, who's doing the marketing and who's paying for it, and that the 15% is or isn't enough. Is there another example that for guidelines on how this is done, or is this pretty standard?
I don't know if there are other programs that are getting the same sort of like outreach efforts behind them. I would be curious, like for some of the programs that are incentivizing like people moving to Vermont to relocate and things like that, what sort of marketing was done for that? If you think back to what this program looked like when it first started, there wasn't a CSE involved. The incentives were done through the electric distribution companies. An earlier iteration of amendments to session law actually had, the incentives will be distributed through no cost contracts with the electric distribution utilities, like requiring the agency to not spend any money really to like get a contractor to actually get the incentives distributed. I think, again, I know I'm saying a lot of talk to the agency, but the program has kind of grown over the years. I can ask my colleague David Hall, who staffs a lot of that more like economic development programs for potential comparators. The agency also maybe has potential comparators for other programs.
I'm just curious. I mean, I don't want to. We need the outreach to be strong, like we want, because we want the. I'm just curious about how it's structured. I'm not questioning that we need outreach, and I think I'm picking up on what Representative Shaw was saying. So we'll just put a little pin in this. We need to ask.
Well, I suppose it depends how the administration writes the RFP for the contractors, whether it's the RFP requires administration or just promoting, or both. And that would be, says they can use. I don't know.
So it also says early on with the subject to state procurement requirements, the agency may retain a contractor or contractors, plural, to assist with marketing, program development, and administration for the program. So you are giving them the authority to retain a contractor. You're not saying they shall retain a contractor or multiple contractors. So there's some flexibility there if they think one entity can do it all, if they think they can do some of it within the Agency of Transportation.
Being too picky.
Sorry?
Maybe I'm being too picky.
Okay. Representative Burke?
Well, remember originally they had utilities were doing the administration.
Oh, that's what we heard, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear that. And I guess it seemed that they needed something that was too much to ask them to do. A&R had an incentive program for wood stoves some years ago, but it was just like first come, first served. Kind of thing, $400 to switch out your you're a better, less polluting Woodstock. But it was just a very small program. And they administered it.
I would say, I'm not hearing that there's a question about whether it should be marketed or outreach. I hear that it's about like how it's, if there are a few different entities doing this work, like, you know, we don't want to micromanage the Agency of Transportation, but we also want to make sure that we're asking these questions and maybe, you know.
What's I mean, you might have said this, but what's the 15% of? There's a whole 18 million that we put in there. I mean, it says FY '23, but there's really isn't a set amount per year. It's a lump.
Oh, I was just saying that was in the fiscal year 2023 budget. But if we go back and we look at the language from, you know what, it's not going to be here. Hold on, we can pull up the.
Very good, just tell us. We trust you.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember exactly what it said, and I do not want to misspeak if I can avoid it, and I, you know, do remember the act number from last year, so that helps. Okay, so this is carry forward deployment in fiscal year 2023 language. I can't remember which program this is for, but it all had the same language. So subdivision 1 was the carry forward language. Subdivision 2 was the every reasonable effort language. And that would apply to the whole pot of money. Outreach and marketing. The agency, in consultation with Drive Electric Vermont and the Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association, shall ensure that there is sufficient outreach and marketing, including the use of translation services, et cetera, for these programs who are eligible, learn how to secure as many incentives as are available, and such costs shall be considered administrative costs for purposes of subsection F. And then subsection F said administrative costs, the agency may use up to 15% of any single authorization in subsections A to D of this section for any costs associated with administering and promoting the vehicle incentive program. So A to D were going to be like your incentive program for new PEVs, which I think subsection A. Mileage Smart was B, replace your ride. So this is saying up to 15% of each of those authorizations, which were backed by the big bill appropriation of general fund dollars, could go to administrative costs.
So it's 18 million. It's 15% of the 18 million.
In a one time, but then if that's to carry.
Well, then the money's gone. Then I guess then they're not doing any work.
Yeah.
This money's gone, man.
Yeah, I mean, and again, saying like if you're looking at this codification language, and maybe you don't want to codify this piece because it is related to an appropriation, you would want to have the approach be, if we're going to put more money to this program, maybe we're going to say only 10% can be administrative costs, and there's this separate amount of money that can be for outreach and marketing. But the agency is proposing in this version to, you know, take the same approach that was done prior fiscal year in terms of maintaining those percentage amounts for what can be kept to administer the program. And again, up to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they have to spend all 15% on administrative costs.
We'll go for about 15 more minutes on this and then we have to shift. So whenever there's a good.
And I am not needed in House Gov Ops until 3 now, so I can stay for a teeny bit longer, but I think you had a break scheduled from 2:30 to 2:45.
Yeah, well, why don't we'll take this then to like I think a good wherever there's a good breaking point here.
So you are.
We're getting closer.
I am done. Oh, so obsolete language is getting deleted in the codified language.
There you go. Yay.
So that takes you to the end of the incentive program for new PEVs. For purposes of Mileage Smart, far fewer changes are being proposed by the administration. The only things that are changing is you're not requiring any consultation with specific entities. And by saying that they are allowed to, the agency is allowed to contract for work, subject to state procurement requirements, there's not the same language of the incentives need to be distributed through community action agencies. So your community action agencies could still be involved, but it's not required that they be involved. And if you remember, this is the program that's not being administered by CSE. There is nothing else about Mileage Smart that is proposed to be changed. And what you were just talking about with the administrative costs and the marketing and outreach, it's still that 15% and the can be included language. I can.
Madam Chair.
Yes, oh, sorry, Representative McCarthy.
Mileage Smart is being administered by the third party.
By Capstone.
By Capstone. Okay, Mileage Smart is Capstone.
Yep.
I keep forgetting
And
which one is.
Mileage Smart is the only one
Right.
that is not being done by CSE.
Right, okay, thank you.
I just got up and running last year, Miles Smart, right?
Not just last year, but it was the one that was sort of delayed by COVID. It was the one that was originally going to be linked with the emissions repair vouchers. And Mileage Smart is different. If you look at your incentive amounts, they're based on household income being at 80% or less of state median income. So that's the one that takes into consideration household size. And the way the community action networks have decided to administer the program is it's a percentage of the vehicle price up to $5,000. So for that, depending on how much you're paying for the vehicle, your incentive amount is going to change, but it's never going to get above $5,000. So different income eligibility, different structure to the incentive, used vehicles, not new vehicles, administered by Capstone. And none of those things are proposed to be changed in this language except for the administered by Capstone piece. And that might not even change. I think I can get through Replace Your Ride.
Yeah, let's do it.
Quickly.
Let's do it, yeah.
So Replace Your Ride, this is the one where the program is a little more complicated because you only get your incentive amount if you remove from operation a vehicle that is low efficiency, and that's all defined in the program. And then by doing that, you get an incentive amount that can be used for things other than just purchasing a vehicle. So in terms of changes, not requiring the consultation. So that's similar to the approach that the agency is proposing for all of these, is eliminating the required consultation. The incentive amounts and income eligibility, they're proposing a change there. You go to that chart at the end, you'll see that under the program currently, you only can get a $3,000 incentive, and it's only if you qualify for the higher incentive amount, lower income band for the incentive program for new PEVs, or you qualify for Mileage Smart. So by proposing to add in eligibility for individuals in the higher income band, more people would be eligible for an incentive under the Replace Your Ride program. They're also proposing to increase the incentive amount. So if you are currently eligible for an incentive under the Replace Your Ride program because you're at the lower income eligibility tier, the incentive would go from $3,000 to up to $5,000. And then for the higher income tier, it would be a new incentive amount of up to $2,500. And then the only other change that is proposed for the Replace Your Ride program is going to be what the incentive can go towards. And it's to expand it to say it could also go towards purchasing or leasing, purchasing a new or used electric cargo bicycle. That's an addition. And taking out privately operated vehicles for hire. So that would be like a taxi cab or Uber or Lyft. That's it in terms of the proposed changes. It's got that same language about the up to 15% for administrative costs and the requiring marketing and outreach, and it can be part of the 15% cost. So if you were to try and put on a Post-it the changes for Replace Your Ride, I think you could do it. More people would be eligible. there would be a higher incentive amount for those who are currently eligible, a additional new lower incentive amount for those who are not currently eligible, and there's a small tweak to what is incentivizable in terms of you did your swap, you got rid of your lower efficiency vehicle, no changes there, but now it could go to an electric cargo bicycle, and it couldn't currently go to that. And it cannot go towards privately owned vehicles for hire, which is a facet of the program that the agency hasn't gotten started yet. So it's consistent with current practice to say that it's not going to go towards those entities.
So, I didn't want to cut you off. Were you done?
I'm done with
Okay,
replacement.
with those. So I just want to get a sense from the committee. This is our, this is our second time going through this, but with a finer tooth comb with the committee. We're coming to the time in the session where we have to make some decisions about if we're comfortable with this, we can support it, we don't support it, or that we need more information. So maybe we could just, I'm curious to hear what thoughts, where the committee is on, I think Replace Your Ride and the Mileage Smart program. There not a lot of substantive changes,
Yeah, I think those are
with the exception of like in the Replace Your Ride, that they're the incentive is increasing from $3,000 to $5,000. And folks, we heard in testimony that the reason for the rationale behind that was, vehicles are without a higher incentive. They're seeing that this is not moving.
The one other thing I'll add is the same changes to the income bands that were proposed for the incentive program for new PEVs are also proposed for the Replace Your Ride program. So I think that's a conversation that you have once, not necessarily for each program.
Yeah, exactly, that we do them all together. So I mean, in my notes, I have that with the incentive amounts and income eligibility, that we had some discussion, we'll need some more discussion about that as a committee. And I think Representative McCoy, did you catch, you might have come in after that. So I think we need more discussion on that, just to make sure that people are clear and understanding how the programs work. But outside of that, like how are people feeling about these changes?
I mean, my initial reaction, the way I look at things, my comfort level with our first program that we created for EVs, I'm fine with codifying it. As a track record, it's been successful. As far as Miles Smart and Replace Your Ride program, it's been a little bumpy. I mean, I'm fine with doing session law, but I think once you go into codify, it's just sort of, I know that they're both law, but it's sort of like the official stamp of approval that these programs are going to be here for quite a long time. So initial reaction is actually just to codify one, the first one, and leave the other two just into session law, make the changes that the committee wants to make. But that's where I'm on that, as far as, the codification and, session law, if that makes sense, but.
Great. Those are some of that's what the question that's being asked for us. Representative Burke?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Replace Your Ride really hasn't gotten going, so we don't know, but I do think that, I think Mileage Smart has been successful. I think maybe we need to hear some numbers about what they've incentivized. And I think they were, certainly impacted by the pandemic and then by the supply chain issues. But I think that, if we were to even get a statement from them about how many cars have they incentivized this year. Because it does seem like it's sort of institutionalized now in their programs. And I guess we're not talking about bicycles right now, right? Bicycle program.
If we could just wait just a minute on that,
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're not talking about that.
Yeah. Others, Representative Shaw?
I want to clarify from Tim what he was saying. So you're kind of okay with codifying chapter 29, on page 9.
Yeah, the first,
That,
yeah,
and
section.
the program itself, and then okay with codifying mileage part, but a little iffy on replace your ride.
No, I said the only one I would be comfortable with would be the first one, not the next two. You just codify the original program that was created.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But not-
Molly makes a good point, on Miles Smart, but definitely not there.
I think we should
Replace the
hear, I
ride.
think we should.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm making some notes that the committee might want to hear more about Mileage Smart. Before we,
It's coming into my position.
yeah, I can give, we have had those, we've had them in, but it sounds like we need a little bit more info from them, even if it's written details about the program. But with Replace Your Ride, I mean, I think it's true that program hasn't really gotten up and going. It doesn't mean, I mean, just, I'm gonna quote Anthea, it's like there's money there, so that doesn't mean, if we don't codify it, if there's money in that program, it doesn't mean that the program is not gonna exist. But I think the question before us is if we codify these programs into the green books, I'm saying for shorthand, so.
Minor difference, but subtle, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah, in my mind, it's a difference. Even though it is.
I will say from a drafting perspective, when we say like, there's no difference between codified law and session law, codified law is just easier to find. And then if we look at all the times that the incentive program for new PEDs has been amended, and then you have to like look in all these different places, that's not the case for Replace Your Ride, which is a relatively new program. I will say that if you want to make the changes for like the income bands for Replace Your Ride, it might make sense to just have it be like a little cleaner, to still repeal the Replace Your Ride session law and then enact new session law that has those changes. So kind of a like in between point where you're making it easier to find, it'll all be in one place. That one place will just not be the green books. So that's just another thing to consider.
Representative McCoy?
I will still, once again, say, as I did the last couple of years, I don't really understand why all of these programs aren't within the contractual thing through AOT, and why we have Mileage Smart separate. If we're trying to do a one-stop shopping for an individual, that they can go to this, whoever the third party is, and grab all the information instead of, well, no, now I may have to go over here to a complete separate entity to find out about a different program. That's always been my angst with this. If we're trying to make it clean and easier for the public to use, I don't understand why we have these two. We've contracted with these, but we've left Mileage Smart over here.
So I just want to, for purposes of what Drive Electric is doing, you can see the information about Mileage Smart on their platform, on their website. So if you click on state incentives, it does have all.
I know, but we are paying an additional 15% administration fee to a complete different entity than the other two. I mean, if you're one stop, it would be, I think we'd probably save money on it if they're all on one.
So I can't speak to that. All I can say is for purposes of the public-private partnership with Drive Electric, which is not the same as what Capstone is doing or what CSE is doing, that has yielded information about all the programs being in one place. It's the only thing I was mentioning for you for purposes of where information is.
I mean, we'll be having some testimony. I mean, it's a question of the agency, I think, that we can ask them. But Representative Burke?
Yeah, just maybe, I'm not really qualified to answer this, but just my impression is that with the Mileage Smart program, they're dealing with particular clientele. They do a lot of counseling, financial counseling. How do you, about getting a car loan, things like that, because they're dealing with the population. They might be dealing with somebody who's having problems with, accessing a job and getting you know, a vehicle. So it's sort of a more comprehensive kind of program than just helping somebody to find out what their incentives are for buying a car. That's my impression. I think it would be helpful to hear that from them or from the agency.
And we did hear in that testimony, it's a pretty high touch program. I think they do have to go through kind of a different process, is what we heard, for eligibility. So, and we will be hearing, Sue Minter's coming in tomorrow. We can ask if people have more questions about, that's not what she was, scheduled on our agenda to speak about, but if we have time, we can certainly have those questions. So, but going back to the question, it sounds like, we need a little bit more information on Mileage Smart and Replace Your Ride, whether Replace Your Ride, there seems to be a little bit of consensus, but this is not a committee vote, but I'm just trying to move us along in our process to seeing where we are in terms of codification. So with Replace Your Ride, maybe it's a little too early to be, is what I'm hearing the committee saying, to codify it at this point into Representative Bartholomew.
Well, I was just going to say, it makes sense to me to keep it all together, whether it's, I don't have a strong opinion about whether it should be codified law or not. But particularly as we move forward, make it easier for future legislatures to look at this. Most of these incentive programs, we have them for really two reasons. One is to enable lower income people to embrace the technology, and the other is to get people to accept change. And most of these, as we meet with success and as things move more and more towards electric, these incentives are going to go away. We're going to be repealing them, but probably not all at the same time. So having them all together and looking them together makes sense to me.
Okay.
Of course, I like things organized, so.
One page, you only want.
Give me one page, yeah.
Representative Potts?
I'd be all right either way with that. But the only thing that I'm feeling a little unsure is having that flexibility to reduce the amounts over time. And I would worry that as the money starts to slow down, then the amounts start to go down, so we don't ever have to come back and reallocate for them.
Okay.
Well, maybe one of these programs, the electric vehicle one, we might want to keep going, or any of them. So,
some of it's about money. Yeah, some of it's about money. Some of it's about the codification. So, this, I think, in our bill, this is kind of the one of the more complex sections, just because we're changing. Like we're codifying it, and there are changes happening at the same time. So, right, it's a pretty big substantive.
How many pages does it take that? Maybe we can get this bill onto Twitter.
All right, well, I think it's a good place to, we're going to be continuing to come back to this. But I've asked Anthea, is that good for you, Anthea, if we pause here?
Yeah, the only thing I would just mention is in terms of the language that the agency is proposing for codification, you also have the Electrify Your Fleet program.
Yeah.
And you do not have the e-bike incentive program. So that's the last two bits on that one chart.
So while we're just, Representative Burke, why don't you wanted to say something about do you want to hold off? We're going to.
About the electric bikes?
Yeah.
Just that I would like to add some money to the program.
Again?
Just said I would like to add some money to the program.
Okay,
There's no money for the program. There's money in the BAA, but there's no money for the program going forward. And I would like to propose some money.
Okay, so right now.
But if this is not the time, that's fine.
I
wasn't sure.
We're going to have time. We're going to be.
I don't want to miss an opportunity.
Sure, there we go. So this week we're going to be doing a lot. We're spending a lot of time with the policy language and looking at the monies. We're going to be, and there'll be redrafting going on and new language. So I just want to let the community know we're going to be kind of pivoting mostly between those two places. We're going to be hearing some testimony on the budget too, but I'm hoping that at the end of the week that we can all go off with a good draft of the T-bill, and knowing that we might take it home over the town meeting, we'd be able to look at that, and knowing that there'll probably be some refinements and changes, but that we're in a good place that way, and that we'll we'll have a chance to walk through budget. So maybe that's a good transition. So every year, the Appropriations Committee asks the committees to weigh in on the FY20, to weigh in on the budget, this year's FY24 budget. And Chris, do you want to come up and join Anthea? Because I know we have two chairs.
So since I'm gonna leave, maybe it makes sense for Chris to do the screen sharing.
Okay.
He can sit here because he can plug in his laptop.
Great.
And the one thing I will say, as I am moving, is that unlike in years past where there was the memo that was sent from House Appropriations, sort of asking for feedback, potentially in a memo, we were sent a chart this time, and I know that that is up on the committee page. It sounds like maybe there is a desire to fill in the chart or to leave blanks in the chart and then also provide additional sort of commentary in a memo. I think much like the way that you worked on your budget adjustment language with Chris while I was at LCAR that one day, and then Chris, gave me information and we were able to turn it into a memo for the committee to review and then consider something. Certainly can do that process again. I'm going to excuse myself in a little bit, and Chris will certainly fill me in on it.
That sounds great. This is great. So for, returning members, I think that you're more familiar with this process, and that this year it's a little bit different. So, and for new members, it's new for you. Everything's new. So I think Chris brought some things to pass around, which is, I think, a copy of the memo itself, and then this. Are we doing the?
There are 3 documents.
Yes. Okay, and then the transportation on a page.
Correct.
So here, I'm gonna.
We're not having any kind of break. Should we just go when we need?
Sorry?
Are we getting any kind of break, or should we just go when we?
I'm just, at 3:00, I'm gonna try to take a break. If you need to take a break, go and take a break, but Anthea has to leave in like 15 minutes essentially, and I just wanted to get this started in. All right. I have one of those. There are 2 things there. Let me just, yeah. And then, so there's a lot of paper, we're gonna have a lot of paper this week. Yeah. Take one of those. And for the members who are joining us online, I'm sorry that but these are also on our committee page. They're posted. So, So, Chris, help me, Chris and Anthea, help me do this. I think really like the T-bill is, we work on our T-bill and most of it is in the 900 numbers that you'll see here, like become part of the big bill. I think for our memo that we need to get to them by tomorrow, it's really focused on two areas where there are things being covered by the general fund, the transportation fund. So since, Chris, you have it up on your screen, why don't you jump in here and.
Sure. For the record, Chris Roop, Joint Fiscal Office. The chart that I am sharing is up on the House Transportation Committee's website under Representative Lanfear's name. But I made a few annotations here that I just wanted to walk you all through. These, and this supplements what the chair just says, it doesn't supplant. But due to the fact that there's a lot of moving pieces this time of year, there were a few items that were flagged in this memo that have subsequently been moved to the FY23 BAA. So that is why there are a few annotations in here that I just wanted to draw your attention to. There's also going to need to be 3 small technical corrections to the B900 numbers You remember when the white books were dropped off and then some tabs had to be swapped out to make some technical corrections, and then there were a few other corrections that needed to be made? Well, we also need to align the B900 numbers to speak to all those corrections. So I passed around, and this is up on the committee's website under my name, a little chart here that shows you what all those B900 numbers are. You will see 3 sections flagged: B903, B906, and B919, that there will be some minor adjustments that will need to be made to the budget appropriations to align the B900 appropriations to the numbers in the White Book. So that's what that is. These are technical corrections just to make sure that everything lines up in the budget, so the money is there to pay for the decisions you all make. So I have flagged 3 areas up there with just little notes on my chart here, just to draw attention to that. Now, going down to the language sections, C106 and C107, I'm bouncing back to this chart. There were 2 items in there flagged that was technical language proposed in the governor's recommend around how the T-fund reserve is calculated. And you remember we went over this a few weeks back. I flagged that these 2 items are no longer in the big bill. They got moved over to the BAA. So you all do not need to speak on these items anymore in your response. There is one item that I wanted to add that when I was reviewing the big bill language, it was omitted from the memo, and that is D101A1 is the section of the big bill that would make that $10.9 million transfer of general fund dollars to the T fund, which is really integral to making sure that the governor's recommended budget ties together for transportation. So I figured that's something we should probably add, because it's probably something you want to speak about.
I think so.
There was one other item here that I flagged in D101A3. I just added the dollar number of the transfer from the downtown, from the T fund to the downtown fund, at $523,966. That's the same transfer that was made last year. That is something that is relevant to this committee. It is in the big bill. I just added the dollar figure next to it, so you all can weigh in on that.
Excuse me, Madam Chair,
Yes, Representative Campbell?
could I ask Chris to make this bigger? Because I don't
Sure.
see this document on the website. So, and I can't read it when it's so small on the screen.
How's that?
Well, that's better, except yeah.
I can also send this version around you. You will see this also in whatever document that you have circulated to review. I just wanted to flag these items as corrections.
Okay, thank you.
There were 2 other items I wanted to draw your attention to here. In E100 is where positions are created. The governor's recommended language for the big bill created 3 positions over at DMV, but created them as limited service positions. I think you all heard from DMV that it was their intent to make them permanent classified positions rather than limited service. This would be your opportunity to elevate that issue to the Appropriations Committee to make sure that they fix that. And lastly, on the same vein of technical corrections, E900, where they calculate where there's language about how to calculate the T fund reserve, they basically have standard language that excludes the reversions from the purposes of calculating the reserve. Think about it, that makes a lot of sense because a reversion is essentially a canceled appropriation. So you do this so you're calculating the stabilization reserve on the net appropriations. The original big bill language had a number of like $24.1 million there. We need that to be technically corrected to say 20.7. 20.7 will sound very familiar to you all. That is the total of the FY23 reversions that got moved into the BAA. So this is just a matter of making sure those numbers align. There's a $3.5 million even discrepancy in those numbers. It has to do with the fact that when the 24 budget was initially proposed, it included a $3.5 million adjustment to the rail budget in FY '23. That subsequently got moved out of the big bill and into the BAA. So just to make sure all the numbers are tying together, that reversion total in E900 needs to say 20.7 to line up to the reversion total that is now in the BAA. Those are my notes for the sort of technical correction items to flag for you all in this chart. It really just reflects the fact that some things have happened since these memos were developed. Specifically, the BAA took shape in the Senate, and that's where some of these sort of housekeeping items that dealt with FY '23 got moved out of the big bill and into the BAA.
Everyone following that, go ahead.
So, Representative, we don't know what happened to the BAA yet, do we? And
The BAA is not finalized in the
Okay.
Committee of Congress. These items have been agreed to.
Okay, all right, that was my question.
There are only a few outstanding items in the conference committee. Unfortunately, none of them pertain to the transportation
Okay,
space.
well, that's good. All right, thank you.
So this is a new process and they're trying to make it easier for the, for the policy committees to share their proposals with the appropriations committee. But really, like, we're gonna be working on our BI, fair to say, right, Chris and Anthea, like, we look at our transportation on a page, right? It's our bill, the B900s. So really what they need to hear from us are two, beyond these technical corrections that you flagged, I think are the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. This is something that is showing up as being covered by the general fund in FY '24. And we've heard some testimony about that, and we can have I would like to have some committee discussion to wrap a bow on that, so to speak. And then the other big item is this new general fund reserve, which is about to be picked up this year. It is for to match IIJA funds in two fiscal years out, FY '25 and '26, to match those dollars. So that's what the appropriations committee is looking for us, and we make our recommendations and then they do their work, because they're weaving all the pieces together and have the big picture. So what I'd like to be able to do is for our committee to have some discussion on this. Anthea can help us if we need to write up more than a memo that's in here, and then bring it back to the committee to have a final review tomorrow is what we're hoping. Is that timeline work for you guys?
Yeah, that seems doable. The
Okay.
one thing I would just add is, and this is something that the Chair of House Appropriations experienced for the last 2 years, is that this committee has not really finished with its work on the T-bill, which makes the position that you as like a policy committee and kind of a money committee are in a little bit different than some of the other policy committees. So there are like moving pieces of the transportation bill that could change. And just to pick a really simple example, if you were to, change the highway maintenance budget, then that would be something that would change in the B9 sections in the big bill. That's a very simple, discrete example. But if you think about some of the language that you skipped over when we were doing our section or draft 2.2 walkthrough last week, trying to do like with the connectivity grants for the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail and things like that, there's the money piece, and then there's also the policy to the money piece. And my recollection from some of the memos that this committee sent in prior years said a little bit of like, this is what we think now, but we haven't finished our work on the T-bill yet. So just to say we're in a slightly different position than some of the other policies.
Thank you. That's
Cost
good.
corrections and institutions is with your capital bill
Right.
being far from done at this point.
Right. And, because otherwise we could go home after doing this. We could go home early for a town meeting break.
And if I could just put a finer point on what Anthea said, which was an excellent overview, is, I think the Appropriations Committee is often used to this committee's feedback coming in. Not one of the first ones, but tends to be one of the later ones. And it's because I think there's an understanding that we have a process here that we go through. And also most of the money involved is sort of discrete to the transportation world and the transportation fund. So there aren't as many moving pieces to disrupt the overall budget. Having said that, I think the sooner you all can weigh in on your thoughts of areas where the general fund is supporting and areas where language needs to be tweaked, I think that would be greatly appreciated by them.
So kind of to that end, I think we could focus where the transportation projects are drawing on general fund dollars. So on this page, it's really where the dollar figures are filled in and where they want our feedback. So we could write, and I have a feeling that our committee's comments might not fit in that little box. So we might use this as a way to guide our conversation, but we might wind up doing a committee memo.
One thing that could make sense is if you'll see in the column heading, it was like, if you're okay with this, leave it blank or something like that.
was the same as this.
In the spreadsheet that came from House Appropriations, you could always put there for the ones that you have more to say, nothing in the box and just say like see attached memorandum.
That's what it is, what I had. Who needed it? Sorry, I'm sorry. Are there more copies?
Anybody needs it?
Yeah, another copy.
I do.
There's just 3, correct?
All right, I'll take that.
There are 2 actually, Molly, there's that one, and then there's just the one that has Chris's comments on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you want the,
you actually
You
need
don't
that.
have that one.
so I think we need one more, Chris. Yeah, that was what was just passed to you.
That's what confused me about it. That's why I said, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I didn't have it.
Yeah, we want everybody,
Yeah.
we literally want everybody to be working from the same
I
page.
don't have this that. I don't know what happened to mine.
Oh.
You got that a long time ago?
No, this was just.
We just passed that around.
I don't know if anything's really changed on it other than technical corrections.
No, Molly, we just got these just now as we were sitting here. This one has just.
There's comments in here just to draw attention to the technical corrections. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not more than that, it's technical comments, that's it.
So,
These big ones?
Yeah,
Just looking for one of these.
this guy.
There are no numbers.
all right.
I printed 15 copies of it, so I don't know where they.
It may have come around.
Molly, I think we just gave you everything that we're looking at, right? Did you just get this?
I know, I think they're,
She's missing this piece, so that's what we're just wondering.
No
Can I give her a box?
Yes.
Right,
I can.
it needs to be filled in.
All right. Okay, folks, I want to get us focused because we're losing Anthea soon, so I just would like to, so let's start with like the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. 3 million is in the,
which one I know is not.
okay, if we're looking at this, it's go down to the second page with the first number that appears on there. 3 million, B,
No.
1100A parentheses 9. This is the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. I think we heard, these were I think they were calling them the connectivity grants. We had some good committee discussion about some of this. We heard, just to bring us back, Senator Sanders gave an earmark for this. This is different than the work on the trail itself. This is connectivity grants, the idea of like connecting. We saw different examples, right, of like parking lots or signage and wayfinding and things like that. Senator Sanders, how much was that appropriation? Was it 800,000?
No, it's about 800 something, almost 900,000.
Yeah, so.
I think that might have been the first phase. I think it might have been a little more than that in total. I think it was about 2 total.
Yeah, that was-
Two, and they've spent 800,000 of it, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
And the testimony that we received, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but testimony that we received that's gone out mainly for scoping studies in communities. That we don't have projects, the construction projects back, and they don't anticipate them coming back. Yeah, and there's an ask here for 3 million. And what I heard in the committee was that there were some concerns that people, I think, just to say, people love this the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. It's a tremendous asset in the state of Vermont. We, as a legislature have invested a lot. This is folks with the vast trails were maintaining these trails, and now we invested significant funds over the years to really maintain them and build them out. And now the Agency of Transportation, within the rail budget and section, we have rail coordinators who are looking at the maintenance. That's all separate from this. This is 3 million that's being asked for, is for connectivity grants. And it would come out of general fund dollars. So I want to hear, I heard some questions about whether this money is needed this year in FY24, and whether there were some questions about whether this should be set up as a separate new program. I heard, and this is not to say that the committee did not say they valued the program. But please, that's what I think I heard as the chair. Other comments? Because we do need to make a recommendation on
Are you
this.
pointing your thumb at me?
I had two thumbs, but the whole committee. but
Sure. I think $3 million is too much for the LVRT grants in this particular proposal, because we found that the staff grant is still there. From what we saw from the presentation, I don't think $3 million is enough to do the work that they're proposing. From their presentation, when I looked at the park and rides and all the other miscellaneous things that they're looking for in at least 3 or 4 of the trailheads. And then I'm thinking about, we're going to hear tomorrow another plea from Green Mountain Transit for funding for fare free, or whatever you want to call it. And last year, that was funded out of the general fund. It was not funded out of the T fund. So I think if the Appropriations Committee would wanted to see fit to fund, I think we should kick that $1 million request downstairs. And let
You mean the GMT?
GMT request downstairs. And if they so chose to fund that, I would suggest that they take $1 million off the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail to fund that. Just swapping of dollars and moving some dollars around for them. But if we're gonna send somebody down there looking for money, I think we have a responsibility to help them find the money. And this could be a way to do it.
So could I
get to LVRT, but you've got to remind you, there's also $6.3 million in there to build 2 more bridges in the LVRT.
So if you don't mind, Representative,
Jump right in.
Could we before we get to the Green Mountain Transit discussion about the 3 million here?
Yeah.
Do you want to share your thoughts on the 3 million?
Yeah, I would
would
reduce that 3 million by $1 million. Give them 2 million instead of 3.
And your reasoning is?
The reason is, I don't think we found some money that they have left over in other grant programs, and that came before, and I don't know that they're ready to spend $3 million in the next fiscal year. Haven't been convinced of that yet.
That's what I heard. I didn't hear that they'd actually have projects for FY24. And so I'd almost say come back next year with the money, but for FY24, I don't think that there are projects to fund. But others, Representative McCoy?
This is separate and apart from the 6.3 million ask for the 2 bridges.
This is separate, yeah. This is in addition to.
Okay.
The 6.3 million is in the bike ped. No, is it the bike ped?
Bike ped.
Okay.
But Representative McCoy, did you have any thoughts on this?
Well, that was my one question, if this is on top of, which it is. And, well, my thoughts on, we've had several rail trails that have been completed for years, but have never had signage or have never had anything, but yet we're completing 100% this one. And the ones that have been there forever don't have signage. So, and, I think it's the longest trail. It's going to be a wonderful tourism thing, as well as for people who live up in, or want to travel up there for the weekend. I mean, I think it's gonna be a gem for our state. So I don't want to completely cut them off. You know, I probably would go along with Representative Shaw and just reducing it by a third, just to, you know. And is this carry forward if they don't use? If they don't use it, they lose it. Well, does that work?
They'll find a place for it.
There's typically global carry forward authority put in the BAA, so.
Okay. Right.
And it would be up to you all also whether you want to extra stipulate your intent on that or not, which this committee has done in the past.
Okay.
Representative Dodge and then Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did they also come to us with that 3 million request also asking for staffing? An expansion in staff? That was not, who was that? That was just
adding another.
So they're two separate pieces. In the AOT budget, under the rail trail budget, there is, I think it's 765,000 that's in our budget. So that's separate from this request. These are connectivity grants that will go to communities to build out the word. This is not for maintenance. I think what if I'm not mistaken, the money that you're thinking about was for maintenance of the trail itself, which is separate from this. Does that
Yeah,
sound
I'm
familiar?
just like, because you're pointing to other pots that are going towards the same rail trail, and so I'm just wondering, if we're talking about bridges and we're talking about staffing and we're talking about community.
I think the other trails would use these new positions. They'd be under the AOT.
All the trails,
right? Yeah, so they would be in service for all the trails.
Okay, so it wasn't part of the.
That's my understanding.
It's for all.
Patty have one stop shopping, just have a category, the rail trail.
So, his hand hasn't gone down. So Representative Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I would just say that my recollection from testimony from the agency too is that they didn't think they were going to use all $3 million necessarily this fiscal year. But at the same time, having invested the amount of money that we've invested in LVRT, and as Representative McCoy says, it's going to be such a gem for the state. I wouldn't want to nickel and dime the amenities in each community along the way. So I guess I wouldn't want to see any less than 2 million, but maybe the thing to do would be to confirm with the agency about their what their real expectations of being.
We're not asking. This is the committee's deciding. So I would just say I don't think we need to.
All right. Well, so
we know what the agency will say. They'll say 3 million. So that's what they've asked. So I mean, it's really.
This is what the governors recommend. Yeah. Anyway, so 2 million. I would land on 2 million then. Thanks.
I'll get Representative Pouch and then.
Thank you. I like Representative Shaw's proposal because I do want to support it. I think the reason the state said that this was the rail trail is because they had a plan in place, a management plan. And, if we want to encourage the management plans in the other one. So I would open it up if where there are the management plans, if that's possible. I would think the 2 million certainly would last the next year, and, maybe a program will go after. I also think, what stops the people on a rail trail from getting a bike ped grant, and why we wouldn't, just have them compete like everybody else for it. And so this will get a little surge going, get some plans going, get a few connectivity pieces. But then at some point, it seems like that whole program, it's all one pile of money, and everybody competes on what the best is. So anyways, back to, I could go with 2, I feel like that's a reasonable compromise.
Well, let me ask you though something that you said. I mean, I wonder what I think I'm hearing you say also 2 million in the bike ped program would be something that would, I recall that there was some questions about, having an earmark specifically for this part. I just have to say, if I were representing my constituents, which I do here too, like, there's a lot of potential for bike ped work and trails in our area, but they don't have access to this. And I think I heard people saying that. And I'm just wondering if what I'm hearing you say is that, like, if it were 2 million moved to another part of the budget, like a bike ped program, and not having a new grant program. I mean, that's something that I'd like to hear what other,
Yeah,
I think I'm hearing you say that.
I think, well, at some point, but I mean, we spent 11 plus more $1 million on this. It seems like, we want to give it a good shot to get it going. And, but at some point, or it could be now, where it all comes from one pot of money and everybody competes for it.
So, okay.
So, did we get the figures from Joel, I think was supposed to?
Joel was gonna get them to us, and then Michelle said she would get them to us, and she was on that train yesterday that had the encounter, so we'll get them tonight.
Okay, so I guess maybe we should hold, I guess it doesn't matter. My concern, if we go with the 2 million, I don't want them to lose it if they're not gonna use it this year. I would like to have that carry forward for if we're gonna give it to the LVRT and they end up with 500,000 left at the end of FY '24. I don't want them to lose it. I want them to have that for the next, however you would write that.
The standard language.
That would be my
Mm-hmm.
recommendation.
So my recollection is that the goal with the LVRT was to create a fully functioning system that would serve as a kind of template that could be then reproduced in other parts of the state. And
I don't know about template. I don't think that's what we've heard. I think.
Well, I may be
Okay.
my word, but that's how I was thinking about it, right? So as a fully operationalized system, if you prefer, that then could serve as a model for how the other rail trail systems could also be built out elsewhere in the state. That was my recollection of the sort of pitch that they made. And so given that this is, the largest, the most significant system, and we've already put so much into it, I see a lot of virtue in seeing it through. To the tune of $3 million seems maybe more than what we is warranted for all of the reasons that have been discussed here. So I would be in favor of supporting the 2 million that Representative Shaw had proposed.
Okay. Other thoughts? Representative Corcoran?
I guess I'll take it to another level. The way I look at things is big pictures, priorities. Obviously, we spend a tremendous amount of money on this project already, no doubt. But as we go down to the things that this committee might want to fund, we have to make tough decisions on where we're going to get this money from. It doesn't grow on trees. As the testimony was laid out before us, it's sort of up in the air whether or not they would maximize this $3 million. There's currently $1 million in there. The time they get this up and running, do the scoping and everything else, would that $1 million alone be enough to get us to budget adjustment of next year? I personally think that it would. So my comfort level is to cut it and make a recommendation to the Appropriations Committee of some of the things that we might want to fund. So I wouldn't have any heartburn just zeroing it out, knowing that there's $1 million in the bottom line, and it's going to take a little bit for even that to get expended, up and running.
And the $1 million you're referring to is the Sanders earmark?
The Sanders earmark, and we're going to be, as Michelle pointed out, we're going to be back here in the budget adjustment 6 months away, which was stated earlier. So throw that back at her. We'll be back here in 6 months. So that's just my 2 cents.
I have to say, I agree. I didn't hear that there was a demand for the 3 million yet. And the way that we have to think through our budgets is, you know, budget adjustment or next year. Sorry? So where are we as a committee? I'm hearing different things. I mean, are the folks, I mean, we could write something that, you know, we like the project, but we didn't hear that there is demand for this money this year, you know, interested in supporting this work, but they have it's like, I think they have 1.2 left. And I'll pull up my notes, on that, but, and that we heard that there are a lot of investments that we are making through the transportation fund in the form of building these 6.3 and the rail bridges and a new maintenance fund and position, expanding the position, so.
We're showing a commitment.
We're showing a commitment to the.
Major, still
yeah,
major one.
Yeah.
So here's what they presented to us. The LVRT Community Grant Program, there's $2 million in grant funding available for improvements along the rail trail. So, and 900,000 or so of that is the Sanders grants. I don't know where the other money is. This is funding for feasibility, scoping, design, and construction. Program will support improving what we all know. Reimbursement 20% match. The application process opened in August. They were due November 1 and announced on December 6th. I haven't seen any of that. Has anybody seen any grants that they've awarded? So they got $2 million already.
Yeah. And that doesn't even account for ARPA funds that towns have right now to match that.
And then the $3 million, they want to mirror the Sanders grants. That was their testimony.
I'm seeing that people need a break. How about, I mean, Chris, I mean, you're hearing the swirl of these ideas. I think maybe it might be helpful to see some language on a page that maybe we can respond to. I know that Anthea is going to listen to some of this.
I think we can work over the evening to try to get the committee something to review tomorrow. I think having this dialogue captured on YouTube is helpful and gives us some direction on
Okay.
on what to sketch out.
Okay. You think that's good enough? Thanks. So I know that we haven't had a break. Do people want to take a 10-minute break and then we can come back? How long are you free?
As long as you have me.
I'd like to be able to finish the conversation, but I'd like everybody to have a chance to get a breath of fresh air. And so if we could come back at 3:30 and we'll continue just to get to to work the rest of our way through the budget memo, and then we'll see where we are. How's that sound to the committee? All right. So, Jeannie, if you could, we're gonna take a break, and I think we need to end the live stream.